Welcome to the MacMillan Report. I'm Marilyn Wilkes, your host, and our guest is Veronica Waweru, a visiting scholar in the Council on African Studies at the MacMillan Center. She's an archaeological anthropologist whose research interests cover prehistoric technological change and innovation in our species, Homo sapiens. Her work focuses on prehistoric projectile weaponry from the Kenya Highlands in the latter Pleistocene. Her work was featured in the PBS documentary, The Human Spark. Her current project focuses on the use of poison-assisted hunting using projectile technology by early humans. Today we'll talk with Professor Waweru about her current project in Yiapan, Kenya. Welcome, Professor Waweru.
Thank you.
So let's start with the site. What drew you to it?
I heard about this site from my colleagues in the Nairobi Museum, and they were not exactly sure what was going on. A farmer had called them in and said, there's some funny looking rocks here. Can you come over? And they get a lot of these reports, so you really don't get too excited until you're out there. They checked the place out and they found out that it was a site. But they did not have somebody who works in with all the archaeological material.
Okay.
So when I was there, I said, can I come along? And they said, sure. And so we went out there, and it turned out to be a very, very exciting site.
Okay, and how long ago was this when the first discovery was made?
This, I believe, was made in April of last year.
Oh, okay, so fairly recent.
Fairly recent,
Okay,
yeah.
so the work you're doing also there is not the traditional kind of work. How is it different from other work that's been done?
Right now, we haven't carried out a lot of work, but the way we've started it, it's going to be both traditional and non-traditional.
Okay, so tell us about the non-traditional.
Let me explain the traditional first.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so the traditional aspect is just the usual, scientific investigation. You go out there, you use the same procedures that other archaeologists are using.
And explain what those are to me. I'd love to hear about what exactly you do.
So you go out at a site, you try and figure out what's going on. You look at the surface finds, the surface indicators. You're going to find, chips of rocks, and you have to figure out if these are really made by humans in the past. And once you figure that out, you also want to find out, what else is in the surrounding area. You want to determine how far the site extends. You want to figure out if it's been disturbed, whether by erosion or cultivation, before you can determine if it's, worth excavating. Because you can find a lot of, very interesting things on the surface in terms of, cultural remains. But if they've been disturbed, for example, by farming, then their context is really disturbed and it's not very useful.
Really? So they might be disturbed on the surface, but if you excavated, you wouldn't find anything necessarily?
So that's the other thing you have to figure out how much is a disturbance. Okay. So if it's extensive, then you probably want to rethink about the excavation.
Right, okay.
But once you determine that there's a possibility of finding more artifacts, you never know what you're going to find. That's the exciting part about archaeology. You can have the best plans and sink this big excavation trench and then end up finding nothing because whatever that was there was only a very small lens on the surface.
I see.
So you have to set out a test trench, and then in this trench you're going to figure out what lies underneath.
Okay.
But yeah, it's usually very fascinating because you can be around for a couple of weeks looking for all the great things that are found on the surface and you don't find them.
Right.
And then just on the last day when you have to go back, you hit the jackpot.
Wow.
Yeah, and then
Very
you have to
exciting.
close shop and
Oh, really? So you do have to?
Yeah, because you're usually running on timetables, and these timetables are determined by you have to come back to your job at the end of summer, or your funding ran out,
Right.
or the rains have come, the seasons have changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what happens to that site? How long does it go without any work being done? Or do you call in other archaeologists from, perhaps other places?
Usually, these investigations require a lot of experts. And so you have a team. You're going to have a paleontologist, somebody who studies bones. You may need somebody who studies plants. You may need a geologist if you're not very good in geology yourself. And so it's usually teamwork. And so what usually happens is that people go there over the summer or the winter break, and you come in as a team.
Okay.
Yeah, but so you go back to to your institutions, try and find funding, and then go back again. And a lot of these excavations happen over multiple seasons.
Okay, so how long have you been out there at that site?
I was there for a couple of weeks, not very long. But we do plan on going back.
Okay,
Yeah,
good,
I cannot
good.
wait to go back. Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the non-traditional work that you're doing there.
It's non-traditional in the sense that we are involving the local people,
Okay.
not in the actual excavation. But in two ways, we get their help in trying to understand what's happening around the landscape.
Okay.
They know this landscape extremely well. So, for example, when I was at this site, I looking at the different types of rocks that these ancient people are using to make artifacts, and I'm thinking this could be local because they're using a lot of this. They're not moving it from very far, and so I talked to the local person and asked him, is there anything that looks like this nearby? And we walked downhill a mile, and there was a quarry. It was a huge quarry, which I probably never have thought to look. And they're also very curious. They're very curious, and we are, they are asking about, these artifacts, who made them, and were they the Maasai? The Maasai are these, pastoralists in Kenya, and were they, ancient Maasai? And we tell them we don't think they were Maasai, but they are definitely your ancestors from a very remote time period. So it's really the involvement of the community in understanding the landscape, but also the other aspect that this is cultural material that is found in their backyards and their farms and their property. And what has happened before is we would hire a few local people to help in the excavations and sieving of the soil, and probably as a local guide, and to help us sometimes negotiate local politics. But we really did not involve them in trying to tell them this is what these things are, and this is volcanic glass, and somebody brought it in from 35 miles away. And it's been kind of sad because they're very alienated from this cultural material that is really part of their heritage. I mean, it's the heritage of all humanity, but given that East Africa is the cradle of humanity, but they're extremely alienated from this material.
Okay, so you're bringing them in and kind of involving them and keeping them posted on what's going on.
Yes, and there's always the worry that if we over-involve them, they might come back and try and excavate the site and try and pick up the material.
Right.
But from my experience, when we leave sites alone previously, I mean, these people know we've been there with our trucks and our fancy equipment, and they usually leave the site alone. And if you can explain to them, especially using the local elders, that don't touch this material, just leave it alone. If you touch it, then the context is lost and it's useless.
Right.
Then for the most part, they will leave it alone.
Okay.
But what I find out, they're really curious and interested, and it's not really fair to kind of alienate them from
I understand.
all of this very interesting history or prehistory.
Right, okay. So what are some of the things you have found at this point?
So what was really exciting about this site is we are finding hand axes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, we're finding these stone tools that are about the size of my palm at the bottom, and this is about a sequence of about 35 feet of sediments. And at the bottom we find hand axes, and this really, we suspect these go back from to maybe as far back as 200,000 years. And then at the very top we are finding things that are about an inch, arrowheads or points as we call them in African archaeology. And this is a really very nice sequence that, that shows that, the progression of technology over, very, very long periods of time. And what is also very interesting is you can see them using local material, and then with time they start importing more exotic material that has, better, properties. It gives you.
Okay, from how far away?
Right now, we're not quite sure. That's one of the things that we really have to find out. But with, given my prior experience, with stone tools and especially the materials that are used in this area, they could be as far as 35, 40 kilometers from the site, or maybe they could be further away. Because if you look at them visually, you can see this black volcanic rock. But if you look at the edges, you can tell it's from different sources. One is kind of greenish, and there's one that is an opaque gray, and then there's one that's all black. But you can see that when they start using this volcanic glass, it gives you a very nice cutting edge. The initial volcanic glass they're using, it's also called obsidian. It's got all these inclusions. It's not very good quality. And then as you move further to the top, to more recent times, you see that they're getting very good quality obsidian. And so they must be getting it from fire, probably trading it in or traveling further out to find material that is, gives you a better working edge.
Very interesting. So has this helped your research at all in terms of the projectile weaponry?
It's going to be great because if I can actually date the arrowheads or the points that we're finding closer to the surface, it's going to give me an idea of when these people probably started using the projectile weaponry, and then I can compare how that has changed. Because what's great about this site is we rarely ever find a nice sequence that shows you all these changes. It may not necessarily be exactly the same people. Maybe the site was occupied over and over by different social groups at different times, and we can see evidence of volcanic eruptions, very turbulent geological times. But you can really see how that technology progressed. Right now we take technology for granted. I have my iPhone 5, the 6 is coming out, I don't know if the 7 is coming out. But in past times, those changes were slow and painful. But when they happened, they did make a significant impact in terms of the survival of the people that came up with the technology.
I mean, that in itself is very interesting, how technology did change over time. And is there any way to know why that happened?
I would imagine that it had some adaptive value. We really do not adopt new technology if it really doesn't have any value to our life. It doesn't make our lives easier. But having that technology is great. So if stone tools go back to about 3.3 million years, and again, this is from Kenya, but not from this particular locality. And if you can imagine, your life without anything, any cutting implement, you just have your nails and teeth. As we say, life can be pretty difficult. We take a lot of these things for granted. But just having that fast cutting edge was great in itself. So imagine having, a projectile weaponry where you can put distance between yourself and something that you're hunting, something that will probably fight back, or something that runs very quickly. That does give you some advantage. And it saves you from injury. If you're injured, you're not very helpful to your society. And then if you're using a spear and you have to chase this animal all over the place, you get tired. You use a lot of calories, and you want to maximize, the amount of calories you get from an animal compared to how much calories you expended while chasing that animal. So if you can save the calories, great. You can apply those calories towards reproduction and other things.
So were Homo sapiens at that point using fire, or did that come later or much earlier?
Based on on finds from other sites, fire has been around for a very long time. So they definitely had fire. They definitely had fire.
Okay.
Yes.
Sometimes I think what it would be like to have been that first person way back then, to have said, hey, let's cut this stone to make this weapon. I mean, isn't that a fascinating thought? Especially for you to think, who would be, that very first person to make that technological change?
It is fascinating. And when I'm talking to the local people, I try and tell them just, can you imagine being able to make something like this and using it to cut up, things, or are we just using a blade from a stone to butcher up an animal? Usually we do these experiments with students, and in the beginning they're incredibly like, this is not going to work. And once they've done it, they're like, wow, you can actually do that with stone tools, and it makes a huge difference. So it is very exciting. And it's even more exciting when you first just find something that has not been found elsewhere, but it's just the one or two pieces, and you're thinking, is this an accident, or is this going to be a trend? And that's why excavating this site is important, because sites that date back to that transition, where you actually get Homo sapiens appear, and then the technology that comes with that are rare. They're extremely rare. And so whatever we have to say about this time period is based on just finds from a few sites. And if the current knowledge is, for most of the time, we say things or we make this generalization just based on a few sites, and then later on we find more sites, and then we have to change what we said before. So it's always better when you have more data from more sites. Because yeah.
So you are you collaborating with other archaeologists at other sites to kind of help advance the knowledge of that time period?
Right now, I'm working with a team from the museum, and we will definitely bring more people on board once we open up a larger excavation. It always makes sense to cooperate with people from from different disciplines. Okay. And so we will compare what we find with what has been found at other sites dating to this time period. They're not that many, but we'll definitely be doing that.
And are they all in Africa?
Yes, for the most part, the sites are going to be in Africa.
Okay. Yeah. I'm wondering, what it will actually take to know how far back humans, walked the land, for instance, what their environment was like. Was their environment, similar to what it is today, or was it vastly different? And also, how they lived.
That's a great question, because the local people are also asking me the same. So the first thing you do is you are going to, once you excavate the site, you date it.
Do you use, is it carbon dating? Is that what it's called, or is it?
This is going to be beyond, the limits of carbon dating. I suspect it's going to be carbon dating right now has a limit of about 50, 60,000 years, okay. And I suspect this is going to be older than that. But we're very lucky in the sense that we have these old surfaces that people lived on, covered by volcanic ashes. So people would be living on on a surface, and they would be dropping their their weapons, and some are broken, and they would be making some on the same site site, and then some eruption would happen, and that site would be that surface would be completely sealed, and then the same people or a different group of people would come by, and then do the same thing, and another eruption happens, and I was thinking about it, just how the life of those people must have been. There's very turbulent geological episodes, and so, but that's great for us because these sites are sealed, and a volcanic eruption is, it happens within a fairly short time, so you can date that event, and so we're going to be using the volcanic ashes to date the sites, and once we figure that out, we can correlate that date to global climate. What was going on at that point, globally? Was it, was the northern hemisphere covered in glaciers, and that would denote like a global cold period? Or was it a warm period? And then locally, you can also find within those the soils, you can, not the ashes, but the soils, you can find plant remains. You can find plant phytoliths. Okay. And you can say, hey, they have those trees and grasses here, or those just grasses. And if you're also very lucky, you may find remains of, small mammals, rats. You may also find things like snails that tell you, well, this was a wet environment. Wow. Yeah, so we use a lot of proxy data to try and figure out, the global climate at that time, and then we look for more local indicators of the specific environment of the site.
Was there anything that was particularly surprising to you while you were working at this site?
What was really intriguing was just why was this place occupied over and over and over again? That is something that is rare, and but it's great for us. And of course, we have to start wondering, did they live here? Did they live someplace else? And talking to the local people, there was this old guy who told us, well, maybe they lived some caves near the river. And I'm like, caves? Why didn't you tell me there are caves here? So he walked us, about 2 miles close to the river, and it wasn't exactly a cave. It was a rock shelter, this rock overhang. And like, yeah, maybe they lived here. Because we found other sites that were also, founded, such rock shelters. So we plan on involving more people. scientists and locals.
Right.
And hopefully we can get a clearer picture of what was going on at the site.
So moving forward, when you go back to the site, ultimately, what would be something that you would really love to find there?
I would love to find what we really hope for is a good sample size. Going down to to the oldest layer of that site, that transition period when you had tools that we can associate with Homo sapiens. The previous tools were being made by a different kind of hominid and probably Homo erectus. But would like to find right now we have a few hand axes, but we'd hope for a bigger sample size so that we know that we can actually convince people this was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, this has been fascinating for me. Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
Okay. For more information about Professor Waweru and her work, please visit our website at macmillanreport.yale.edu. Be sure to join us again for another episode of the MacMillan Report, made possible through funding from the Whitney and Betty MacMillan Center for International and Area Studies.